And this is why, and brings us to a great topic area. This is why I use HRV as a proxy, because you need to know whether your nervous system is recovering or not. Because if you see that it takes a hit and it just stays down and it can't recover back to its baseline, or if the baseline just kind of starts off lower than maybe where it should be, then that should be the signaling system. That should be the awareness system that, before we start any of this type of quote unquote hormesis or hermetic stressors that could benefit you down the road, like, we need to take a step back. That's not the first place we need to go. So let's talk about how you use HRV. Like, how do you use it as a proxy for nervous system functioning, for recovery? Like, what does that look like for your clientele?
Yeah, HRV needs to be one of the biometrics that everyone is tracking. So although I said no at-home lab testing on a daily basis, it's just not typically needed for most people.
Right.
It's just not something that we do. You can test your blood sugar on a daily basis. That's a great thing to do. Fasting glucose in the morning. It'd be like taking your body temperature in the morning, taking your HRV. All of those things are great. Those are great at-home things. I've used a continuous glucose monitor for many months at a time to test variables in my diet. And actually, I found out some interesting things. So for me, I found, just like most people, again, so here's the thing about biohacking and the stressors, right? So if you do a cold plunge or even cryo, you're going to feel amazing when you get out of it. And here's the reason. You just threw your norepinephrine, your adrenaline, and your dopamine through the roof. Now, you might say, well, I feel great when I do those things. Yes, you do, but at a cost. Because now you just depleted a greater amount of B vitamins, vitamin C, glutamine, all your stress-based zinc. And over time, maybe not for 3 to 6 months, will you crash. The human body is very strong. It's very resilient. And that's why you can't run just your blood work. Because your blood work will always rob your bones for calcium.
Yep.
It will just pull from wherever it needs to. So that's not a great metric. Now, also, and obviously you've chatted about this in your podcast since you are the expert in HRV. If you do these HIIT trainings or cold plunges, your HRV may actually go up for a period of time. That is not a sign that you're doing the right thing. That's a sign that, okay, your body is trying hard right now. Let's see what happens if you take a day or two off. Does it crash? Or if you keep going, will it crash? Eventually it will. So HRV is an early warning indicator. And that's why I'm a big advocate of looking at HRV, body temperature, breath rates, your deep sleep, your REM. All of that is very important to me. And for heart rate variability, what I'm looking for, and I even did this for myself, and I work with you as well on this, is to say, in real time, what is causing me to have these drops in HRV? And for me, it was a drop in oxygen, which was really interesting for me to realize. I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. I'm getting drops in oxygen overnight. Broke my nose twice. I have a deviated septum, had my adenoids removed, my tonsils removed. There's scarring back there. Okay, let me try more mouth taping. Let me try, and what actually worked was the old school nasal strips to help open my nasal passages because of the deviated septum. Mm-hmm. And then not an elevated bed, but just making sure my head was up a bit so I could, it's kind of like you're doing CPR, right? The head chin tilt right there,
right?
To help get oxygen better in.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I found really impressive was I love weight training. I really do. I've always loved it. It got me through really hard times in college when I was sick and in my early 20s. But aerobic-based training, which I used to throw under the bus because I was a certified personal trainer and strength and conditioning coach in my early 20s.
You lose all your muscle.
That's right. Forget about the cardio. We can transform your body without that. But what I'm realizing now is aerobic training for your lymphatic system, circulation, your heart rate variability, your deep sleep, your telomerase, which helps increase telomere length, is invaluable. So I don't love cardio. I don't love going for a run or a bike, but I do it now because literally within a week, it improves everything.
Yeah.
And that's one of the shocking things to me, which, again, working on you and daily HRV is what I saw.
Right. People that say they like cardio are just lying. They don't all like cardio. No, it's really fascinating because, there's a couple things that stood out here. So one thing that I always tell people is you need to do two different things when it comes to heart rate variability. Number one, you need to be measuring it. And then number two is that you need to be taking kind of that objective data that you get and then also marrying it with subjective data, right? So you need to also check in to see whether or not, do I feel primed? Do I feel okay? Or do I feel stressed? stressed. Because again, we know that there is a lot of input and influence into the biometric that is heart rate variability. Yes, it's a great proxy to the nervous system for recovery, for stress resiliency, but also too, there are other cardiac and respiratory influences that can make that number go up or down. So we have to marry that with, a level of subjectivity and objectivity. But then also too, like when people wear CGMs, one of the things that I say too, and the company Levels is really big right now. I call it the Levels effect. Is like when you put on a CGM, like you automatically, number one, are going to check it because you're curious. Like you want to be self-aware. What influences that metric? That is, blood glucose. The HRV is the same way. You put on a continuous HRV measurement, and you're going to be interested as to saying, okay, well, what is it that kind of makes it go up, down, left, right? That's great, valuable information. But there's also another effect that I see as well, is that when people tend to consistently measure their HRV, and if they do it continuously, like with a continuous monitor, then for them, their mind is also going to be thinking throughout the day, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, like I need to be aware of kind of my overall stress load. I need to be aware of my breathing patterns. It's almost like a bit gamified, right? I don't know if it's like this for you, Stephen. For me, like if I've got a CGM on, like it's gamification for me. Like I'm like, oh man, let me see kind of what I can do to not make that glucose, spike way up or get a bad, metabolic score. Like I gamify it. I do the same thing with like heart rate variability, because for me, yeah, like heart rate variability is a great data or biometric, but it's also like for me, like that is is indicative of my stress load. And so if I can kind of keep that within the window that I want to keep it in, reasonably so, like I know, like if I go out and do, some hardcore exercise and I'm trying to recover, like my scores are going to be lower, like depending on kind of the type of workload I did. But it's just a great way for not only for me to be self-aware of it, but for me just to remember to self-regulate, which is a key component here. That people, like if they take away anything from my talks on heart rate variability, I always talk about self-aware of kind of what affects you, and then self-aware of kind of what helps you to best self-regulate. Have you found, like I know that you've done a lot of personalized training and work in heart rate variability for yourself, and then also for clientele. Like, what have you seen as kind of being like the low-hanging fruit? Like the things that you're like, these are my recommendations for many people. Like if you really want to work on heart rate variability, you mentioned, exercise as being one of them. Anything else that you're like, these are other key components that I've really seen move the needle?
For me, I look at this right now. So I love the continuous heart rate variability, but there's not a lot of companies right now that are able to give you that great feedback all day long, because when I had that, and I got a little bit of that vibration, right, that haptic feedback, then immediately I was like, all right, what am I doing? Let's not repeat that. And let's do a little bit of biofeedback just for a minute or 3 minutes. Because I love it was a game, right? I love being able to see my heart rate variability double. Yeah. That was the goal. And the same with the continuous glucose monitor. But then there's also what people have to understand is that you don't always necessarily want your blood sugar below a 90. Like there are times when you actually want it to go a little higher. Like I'm not saying above 150, but what happens is we always, again, we get in the biohacking mode, not you, but the biohacking sphere has said you need to maintain 75 for your glucose all day long. And that's actually not beneficial. If you looked at leptin and ghrelin and you look at thyroid hormones and you look at cortisol, if you get a higher measure in blood sugar, hormones start to change. And, the body is actually getting carbohydrates, or it's getting these things that can calm cortisol, that can increase thyroid, that can increase leptin and decrease ghrelin. Like these are not bad things. So I just want to throw that out there. And the reason why I say that is it's also the same for heart rate variability. Yeah. I used to go for a run, and my heart rate variability while I was wearing the continuous HRV would drop dramatically. Yep. However, that next day, my heart rate variability in that night would be even better. Yes. So it's the whole picture. It really is a holistic approach to looking at it.
Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. This podcast would not happen without listeners and supporters like you. And the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us reach others and spread the good word of breathing and stress resiliency. If we read your 5-star review on air, please reach out to podcast@hanuhealth.com with your name and mailing address, and we will send you some sweet Hanu gear. Until next time, breathe better and stress less.